Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about Crescendo, which is a Hammer film. It's our second Hammer film that we can discuss in 1970. And unlike most Hammer films, this is not a period piece. This is a contemporary movie. It, despite being a British film, it takes place in France. And we'll talk more about what it's about in a minute, but this is directed by Alan Gibson. Alan Gibson is a British horror director. Actually, I should say he's a British director, and he started out by doing 4 horror films. This is his first one. After this, he did Goodbye Gemini, and he did 2 of the later movies in the Hammer Dracula series. That started in the 50s and went up through the 70s. Writing this film is perhaps more impressive is Jimmy Sangster. Jimmy Sangster wrote over 40 horror movies, including the Hammer Dracula, the Hammer Frankenstein, the Hammer Mummy remakes. All 3 of those he did, and he did a bunch of the sequels as well. He also did Paranoiac and a few others. Well, many others, actually. A few others that I'm familiar with and many others that I'm not. So pretty good combo there. It's got a small cast. I think there's really 5 characters in the whole thing. The whole thing takes place on like a French chateau. And we've got 5 characters, and they're mostly from older movies, although James Olsen, who's the main male actor, he later was in Commando and with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he was in something else too. And Stephanie Powers was in An Experiment of Terror, which is a 60s film I haven't seen yet. She was also in Die, Die, My Darling, which I don't think was the official term for that film. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's got the 5 actors listed here. There's also a very brief appearance by one more girl who was only ever in this and the 3 Karstein vampire movies that Hammer did. The first one was The Vampire Lovers, and we talked about that one right here on this channel months ago. So, what's this one about? It's about a woman, an American woman, played by Stephanie Powers, who you can see down here. She is doing a thesis for her music history major, and she wants to do a thesis on this guy that lives in France, or lived in France. So, she talks to his family. He is deceased. She talks to his family, including his wife, and the wife invites her to stay with her and study her late husband's work. So she gets there, and the wife lives with her son. Her son, played by James Olsen. His name is Georges, which I guess is the French way of saying George, although it's an American actor, and the mother is a British actor, and they both speak with their respective accents. They don't pretend to be French, which is a little strange. There's also a maid and a butler that live there. The maid is a French actress, and a butler is another British actor. And so no one is pretending to be French that's not French, but it kind of doesn't really make sense that there would be this British family with a British butler and a French maid living in France. But whatever. It doesn't matter that much. Before I talk more about what goes on here... Well, no, we can talk more about the premise. So, the movie starts out with Georges on a beach with a woman. They're making out on the beach. And then someone comes up to them with a shotgun, or maybe it's a double-barreled rifle. I'm not a gun expert. I think it's a double-barreled rifle and not a shotgun. But either way, comes up and shoots them. And then we get a glimpse at the woman, and the woman is a decaying corpse. Then George wakes up. So that was a dream, okay? And so then this girl comes to stay with them. So that's basically the premise. Weird stuff happens. It's hard to know what's really going on. There's lots of pieces that seem to be unclear. Like George is in a wheelchair. You quickly find out why. He also needs his medicine, which looks oddly like heroin. And his mom gives him his medicine once a day. But then there's some stuff with that. So before I get into the whole story, I'm going to say I'll give this a 7 out of 10. Although, I would say, the whole time I wasn't probably thinking 6 out of 10, but then the ending boosted it up. It's not super exciting, but it's good enough to stick with. So 7 out of 10 altogether. If you want to turn it off now so that you can go watch it, go ahead. I rented it for $3 on YouTube, although you might be able to find it for free somewhere. So, you can stick with me if you want to hear more about what happens instead of actually watching the movie for yourself. Save yourself 95 minutes. So there's some good twists and turns here. So it turns out actually this guy is hooked on heroin. He keeps having dreams about himself killing him, like he's two different people. And you're wondering what's going on here. And now one part of the story that doesn't really make sense is this beautiful woman who's visiting ends up falling in love with the guy. But he's in a wheelchair. Okay, that's fine. Like, obviously, a person who is abled and a person who is disabled can fall in love. But he's also really mean. He flips out for apparently no reason, although we find out partway through the movie that it's because he keeps going through heroin withdrawal, and then he ends up getting the French maid to give him heroin, but she is trying to, I don't know, blackmail him or bribe him to marry her so that she can inherit the chateau. Well, she ends up getting killed, and we don't exactly know who kills her because she's in the pool and swimming, and then someone gets in the pool and kills her. And it kind of seems like it's George, but he's in a wheelchair, so that's like strange. So there's a lot of little mystery pieces going on. You're not really sure if the butler is a good guy or not. You're not really sure if the mother's a good guy or not. Like, other than this American girl visiting, you're not really sure who's good, if anyone. There's also these parts you can kind of see it. Actually, maybe I can zoom in here. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. If you look here, you can see an eyeball popping out of a girl. Well, there's all these mannequins around, and they're like destroyed. And so we only get little glimpses of those until the end. But basically, the giant spoiler here, the answer to the mystery. Okay, so turn it off if you don't want to hear this. The answer to the mystery is that George actually has an identical twin. And the identical twin looks exactly like him, except he can walk. So the identical twin is the one that killed the French maid. But the identical twin is a psychopath. The identical twin used to date a woman named Catherine. Catherine looked just like Susan, who's the American visiting. Catherine was married to the brother, Jacques, which this is the strange part because the guy is American, but his name is Jacques. So we're supposed to think he's French. Anyway, she's married to Jacques, but she ends up cheating on Jacques with George, who is the one in the wheelchair. Now, Jacques is the brilliant composer who inherited his father's, talents, and George was an athlete, and so he was the black sheep of the family because the family was all musical, hence the name Crescendo, okay? The family was musical. George was an athlete, but he had a tennis accident that left him paralyzed from the waist down. But he is a good person. And we've got Catherine, who cheated on Jacques with George, so Jacques killed her. And then his mother provides him with mannequins that look like Catherine, and she dresses them in Catherine's clothes. And Jacques frequently goes into this mannequin room and destroys them with an axe, which you can see the axe like right about here. So he's totally fucked up, and he is just killing mannequins all the time. This girl, Susan, looks exactly like Catherine, and they start dressing her up in Catherine's clothes, and she doesn't know that there's two brothers. So she falls in love with Georges, who is the nice one, and every time, and he does sometimes go through heroin withdrawal, for real, and Jacques is the mean one. So sometimes Jacques is sitting in Georges' wheelchair and pretending to be him, and when he is sitting in the wheelchair, he is mad and screaming at her and flips out for no reason. So actually both of the brothers kind of flip out. So anyway, this like reveal that there is the brother is pretty cool. At the very end of it, I'm sure you don't care about spoilers at this point. At the very end of it, he tries to kill Susan, and she is surprisingly saved by the mother, who shoots Jacques with that same gun that he shot Catherine with, because she never wanted him to hurt Susan. She only wanted him to impregnate her so that she could have a baby and be the next in line for the musical legacy of the family. So that's pretty much all that. The only other thing I didn't mention to complete the entire plot is that in a struggle, Jacques actually punches the butler one time, and the butler is in the pool when he gets punched. And it's a really weak-looking punch, too, and he dies. So I don't know why the butler would die from one, like, smack to the face. It wasn't even a punch. He died and like, you know, floated in the pool for the rest of the movie. So that part was weird. Anyway, the movie is pretty good. The writing is the best part, not surprising, since Jimmy Sangster was this very seasoned horror writer by this point. He'd already written, like, the 3 most popular Hammer movies, which were at least 3 of the 4 most popular Hammer movies: Dracula, Frankenstein, and The Mummy. Somebody else wrote the werewolf one. So, that's it for this one. You just heard most of the music from it. It's not typical horror music, but it does actually go along. It's music that this family had supposedly written. The entire score is performed by the London Symphony Orchestra. So I'm sure, you know, that's important for people who care about the music aspect. And probably the next one I do is going to be Alan Gibson's second movie of 1970, which is Goodbye Gemini. So we're going to do that one next, I think. All right, see you then.